Ponyville 2 months ago. Twilight shouted from the main room of the library, her patience obviously thin. It was a beautiful day outside, and Spike promised that he'd be up in time for the departure to the park. After all, with the busy way things have been lately, any time spent with their friends was precious and shouldn't be missed for the world. Roared Twilight, her stamping the hard floor impatiently. From above, Spike's voice groggily carried itself downwards to her. Twilight scoffed. Spike rolled his eyes as he came down the stairs, his body starting to gleam from the dark violet magic as he was lifted up and gently placed on Twilight's back. With an affirmative nod, Twilight illuminated her front door with magic and opened it wide, letting in a soothing breeze of crisp spring air. She breathed, smiling as the air cooled her skin and fur. Spike muttered before letting out a great big yawn. Twilight let out a giggle and happily trotted into the beautiful afternoon, watching as the town swarmed with life. Ponies walked and flew this way and that, some pulling carts or just walking with their friends. Every pony was smiling. Every pony was enjoying this beautiful day as it should be. Twilight trotted down Main Street, greeting every pony she encountered with a warm smile and a hearty hello. The sun warming her with its gentle touch. Eventually, buildings turned to trees, pavement turned to dirt and grass, and outside, dining areas turned to picnics and picnic baskets. As they entered the park, already Twilight could see that many other ponies shared the same idea as her and the rest of her friends. All around, ponies ate, played with one another, or participated in little sporting events or competitions. A voice Twilight recognized all too well as rarities called out to her as they made their way across the open fields, one of the various clump of trees that rested in the park. Spike let out a tiny squeak as Rarity came into view, her white coat clearly visible amongst the sea of brown and other colors of their friends that rested on a checkered quilt of white and red. Rarity cooed as Twilight smiled warmly, giving a wave to each of her friends who were resting on the quilt. Applejack said in a joking manner, drawing a small giggle out of Pinkie Pie and a tiny smile from Fluttershy. Twilight smiled and gently nestled herself down on her belly, letting the soft fabric of the quilt caress her as she spoke. Spike simply rolled his eyes, sitting back on his rear as Twilight blinked in confusion. Counting out her friends and herself, and coming up with only 5, she asked, causing Rarity to sigh and roll her eyes. Rarity muttered, shaking her head as she pointed over towards the sky at the rainbow-colored blur that was flipping and whipping about the sky. As if on cue, the frantic cries of Rainbow Dash echoed across the air as she came tumbling out of the air, her body hitting the ground with a soft thud and kicking up dust and dirt in the air as she slid across the ground, finally stopping as her nose bumped into Rarity's side. "Ow," she moaned, rubbing her head as she looked up towards ignoring the harsh glare she was receiving from Rarity, who was now trying to rub the dirt out of her own fur. "Well, hey there, Batlight Sparkle," she mused. "You finally came out of your cave, huh?" Twilight rolled her eyes but smiled as she said back, Rainbow Dash let out a loud yick as she growled, "Please don't call me Rain Rain. You know I hate that name." Twilight said, a triumphant grin passing over her face. "All right," Rainbow Dash sighed. "You got me. What are we gonna eat? I'm starving." The girls giggled, loving how Rainbow always made a hasty subject change when she was backed into a corner. The picnic was going swimmingly, with daisy sandwiches being passed around, as well as small, idle gossip. But all good things do eventually come to an end, started a giggling Rarity, her best attempt at trying to keep a straight face failing. The group broke out in laughter, smiles etched on their faces, until a gut-wrenching scream tore all the happiness out of the world. Fluttershy squeaked, her eyes scanning over the group of ponies in the park who had stopped their activities to wear the same confused expression as Twilight and the others. "Not sure. Sounds like some pony was screaming," muttered Applejack, her hoof tipping back her Tristan as she peered over in the general direction of the scream. Twilight began, until another scream cut her off, this time the scream of a colt. Pinkie whispered, watching as Rainbow Dash got to her hooves and turned towards the screams, watching as every pony else moved to investigate as well. Rainbow shouted, taking to the air and moving off in the direction in which the screams originated from. Rarity called after her, a worried expression passing over her. Twilight sighed, smiling as she shook her head. Came the shrill of a chocolate-colored mare, her side and face streaked with blood as she came bolting out of the woods. The others blinked in surprise as they saw her trip, landing face first in the dirt. It wasn't her tumble that drew shuddering gasps from every pony in the park, but rather her appearance. She was absolutely covered in blood. 3 sets of visible claw marks buried in her skin, each mark bleeding profusely. Her ear leaked with blood as well, including her eyes, which looked to be darkening themselves. Even her mane and tail were soaked with blood. She twitched and flailed about from a spot on the ground, retching and spitting up globs of thick saliva as the many ponies rushed to her aid. Rainbow Dash dropped from the sky, her eyes growing wide as blood started to leak from the chocolate mare's mouth. Her body unresponsive to the touches of 2 mares trying to help her up, her ears not hearing the frantic cries being shouted towards them. The fallen mare didn't respond though, only growl with a ferocity that no pony could have ever dreamed of hearing before. The mare's breathing was raspy, as if her lungs had suddenly been savagely burned and had turned her expelled air into burning ash. The mares helping her up gasped, suddenly backing away as the wounded one gave a violent lunge, ripping herself free from their hold.